Introducing Minor Wisdom Quintet.
1, 2, a skidadidoo.
Minor Wisdom.
Another week down, closer to being out of school for winter break. And this week, as promised a couple of weeks ago, the interview I originally had with Donny Covington from Richardson High School up in Dallas, Texas. Donny is the founder of the Facebook page for technical theater educators. I highly recommend you guys get on that page. There is a ton of information, a lot of resources shared on there, not just by Donny, but other people around the world. Literally 5,000 plus people are on that page. It's a great page for educators or for really anybody that's interested in learning more about technical theater, because there's so much shared. There are a couple of people that are a little pretentious, but that's not my place to police. That's Donny can take care of that. But this is a getting to know Donny, and I did this interview with him at Richardson High School months ago, TETA week, but it's just now dropping because he had mentioned right when we were done, pretty much as I'm literally walking out the door, hey, I forgot to mention the Facebook page, and we had just talked for over an hour. And so we did a little bit of a follow-up. So I held on to this interview until now. I did the follow-up a couple of episodes, or the follow-up yet the first episode a couple of episodes ago about that Facebook page. And I apologize if you're hearing something weird in the back. My dog has got a little bit of an itch and can't get it taken care of. So if you're hearing that, I apologize. Anyway, I do want to spend a little bit of a time on one gripe, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble, and I don't want Philip Taylor coming after me because he's the police of my podcast. But I've got to say something about the way that administration is set up these days. Maybe it's just the state of Texas. I don't know. But as a master's of education with a certification in administration, I hope that one day maybe I go over to the dark side and become an administrator. Not anytime soon. I'm not going to do that anytime soon, but one day it could be in the books, a chapter of my life. And when that happens, I would love to propose the idea, I'm assuming that it's already been proposed, and maybe there's something I don't know that somebody smarter than myself can tell myself. Austin Powers reference. Anyway, it would be wonderful if there was a set of administrators that focused on curriculum and were able to go in and out of classrooms and see the life of a classroom, because a day in the life of a classroom is not the life. A day in the life of a human is not the life. And it's unfortunate that administrators have to grade teachers, especially fine arts teachers, based on one snapshot of a moment. And when we are ultimately graded upon or graded on our entire year, maybe just a full production, maybe our one-act play is our grade, but there's a process to it. And if an administrator is walking into our classroom to see just 45, 50, 55 minutes of that process, and assuming they know from that experience how our teaching style is, or determine how our teaching style is, then I feel that's doing a disservice to us theater teachers, band directors, anybody that has a final product that they are trying to produce through a class that could take 4, 6, 8 weeks, whatever it might be. But anybody that has a final product shouldn't be graded based on that one picture, one snapshot. I would love for there to be an administration team on a campus that is solely responsible for that side of the job. Us theater teachers, as we know, we manage a theater, we manage a classroom, we manage curriculum, we manage, maybe some of us are the fine arts department chairs, the heads of our department. There's so much that is on our plate when all of these things in the real world are split up into individual salaried jobs. Yet, as an educator, we are expected to do all of them and then graded by just seeing that one little snapshot. And I'm not the best teacher in the world. I'll be the first one to tell you that. My students would be the second. But I don't want my career to be based off of the literal 2 times a year I'm seen by somebody outside of my classroom. And if I now have been teaching 10 years, I've had an administrator in my room with the purpose of grading me maybe a little less than 24 times, and I teach 180 days out of the year. So you can do the math. So I feel like there should be a curriculum team and then also be a behavior team. I've got an amazing, probably the best associate principal in the state of Texas, works at my school. People adore him, follow him, would do anything for this man. But he he's he does curriculum, don't get me wrong, but he's a discipline guy. He's the guy that students go to have to go to when there's a discipline issue, or when there's a discipline issue and he's able to sort of put that fire out because he knows how to talk to students. But he's not the curriculum guy. He's not doing this job because he's so good at teaching math, English, whatever he taught in the past. He's doing this because of his relationship with students and his desire to make students better through repairing their behavior and disciplining through life skills. That's his specialty, but he does that with all humans, from 82-year-old chemistry teachers to 22-year-old fresh out of college math teachers. And that is a specific role and a need and a necessity. So why not allow a team of administrators to be over curriculum and a team of administrators to be over discipline? You wouldn't have a lighting designer walk into a theater and design the costumes. Now, could they? If they're a professional, yes. But that's not what you want them to do. That's not putting them in their best situation where they can succeed. And as an educator, we are trying all the time to put our students in places that they can succeed. That might not be the place we think we want to go, but it's the place that we know they need to go. Therefore, why not reconfigure how this is done? And maybe it's done this way in some places. Maybe it's done in the private sector. Maybe it's in private school. Maybe it's done in Colorado or Canada or the Scandinavian countries where education is thriving. I'm going to get off my soapbox now. I hope I didn't offend anyone. I hope I don't lose a job because of my opinion on my own podcast. But every once in a while, I feel like it needs to be said, and I don't want my podcast to be a complaint cast. Therefore, let's lighten things up, move on to this week's interview and this week's Groner joke. Make sure you like the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen. Have a great rest of your week, folks. How does Moses make his tea? He brews it.
All right, so I'm Donny Covington. I'm the director for the Technical Theater Magnet here at Richardson High School. This is my 6th year teaching here at Richardson, my 7th year teaching in general. I came late to theater in terms of formal training. I didn't actually start taking theater classes till college.
Okay.
Part of that was because the school that I went to before, very small school, didn't have a theater program. So we would do...
In Texas?
Yeah, it was just in Texas. It was in DeSoto, a little private school that my mom taught at. Me and my brother and sister all went there. But no, we're talking the whole school was 200 kids. My class was the same 15 kids from 3rd grade through junior year of high school when I stopped going to high school, and spent my senior year just doing dual credit courses at UTA and working. My school didn't have a theater program. We had a music teacher who would put on a quote unquote musical through music class, but that was kind of my exposure. I liked it though, and I knew that I wanted to do more of it. And I grew up going to Shakespeare in the Park with my family. They'd take us to Dallas Theater Center. We'd see shows when they were in the old warehouse space, and then the Kalita Humphreys. But in college, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I knew that much. Since I was 12, I had known I'd wanted to be a teacher, and I can still vividly remember the moment when I realized it and like walked into the kitchen in our house and announced to my parents, much to their chagrin, because they are both teachers, and their response was, well, who's going to support us in our old age?
Yeah.
But luckily my younger brother became an engineer. So
Sure,
it's fine.
there you go.
So I knew going into college, but I wanted to be a history teacher. That was my thing. And I'm still fascinated by anthropology and history and especially like ancient sort of development of civilizations. So I went to college for that. At least that was my intention. And then discovered halfway through my freshman semester that the school I had gone to, which was University of Dallas in Irving, not UTD,
Right.
University of Dallas, the Catholic school there in Irving, didn't really have an anthropology program. And so I had applied to the school, I had gotten accepted to the school, I had enrolled in the school, and it never occurred to me, because of the sort of the nature of that school, it had never occurred to me that they might not have what I hoped to study. But by that point I had known I wanted to do some theater in college, take some classes, but I had no intention of majoring in it. And so after that conversation with my advisor, where he was like, look, we don't really have what you're looking for, here's your options are change your major or
Leave.
Here's some other schools. And to his credit, he said, like, this school has a really good anthropology program, this school has a really, like, he gave me a list of options. And so I said, all right, I'm gonna think about it. And at that point by that point in the semester, I had gotten cast in one of the senior thesis shows, one of their senior projects. I'd started to get to know the people in the theater department. And I kind of realized, I was like, I can do basically the same thing. I can have the same effect on people doing theater that I know I enjoy as I can in a classroom being a teacher. And so I sort of, in that moment, my priorities sort of shifted to, this is it, this is my course. And so I changed majors, threw myself into the theater program, full blast, and very quickly realized that it wasn't, because again, I'm coming with no formal background.
Right.
And so I didn't really understand that technical theater was a thing, but I loved working with my hands. My grandfather and my dad had built multiple additions to our house growing up, so I'd been around, do-it-yourself construction my whole life. I loved it. Discovered that this was a thing. I discovered I could do work study. Like what? Like work study in the theater? I can make money doing this stuff. And then directing. And that was the thing. Like by my senior year, I really had kind of settled in. And like the things I love are technical theater and directing. Kind of all the creating the world, creating the thing. And so came out of college, worked for. It was about two and a half years doing just freelance stuff here in Dallas. Worked with pretty much all the major and minor theater companies in Dallas doing technical work. I directed some shows. I did a lot of prop work for companies. And then I joined a theater company that I ended up staying with for about 8 years. It was Nouveau 47 was the company originally, and then we morphed into the Margot Jones partnership, which we were in control of the Margot Jones Theater in Fair Park, the original space, and ran that for about 8 years. But yeah, along the way, the freelance, it was kind of a combination of things, kind of a perfect storm of things. Got married, learned that we were having our first kid, bought a house, all like in a 6-month period. And at the time I was working with Freeman Audiovisual in their scenic department, building corporate scenery as my day job. And I was like, and it was kind of one of those things of like, I need more stability. It's time to get the stability. The job's not going the direction in terms of advancement. The job's not going the direction that I was expecting it to. And so I finally sort of gave in to the impulse that had always been there and made the move back to the classroom. And I'm so glad that I did. Like, this is exactly where I want to be.
So quite a few things conjured up in my brain. One, we share the history love. I got my minor is in history. It's clearly not in English, since I just said I got my. But I was a war history guy. I wanted to take every class that had to do with war. And the most interesting class that I took. Did you end up doing history at University of Dallas? Like,
So that for that first semester, I was
okay.
in a.
But I mean, they had history classes,
Yeah.
just wasn't an anthropology
Right.
major.
Oh yeah, they had.
Yeah.
They just
Okay.
They didn't have classes in
Specialties.
anthropology. Like theirs was very much Western civilization. So
Okay.
like, from the
Yeah, yeah.
Greeks on. But like I grew up. So I grew up. I grew up with my family doing reenacting.
Okay.
So we did French and Indian War was
Okay.
the main one that we did. I did Civil
One of
War
my
for a little
best
while.
students right now, and I know he listens to this, is
Okay.
a World War I and II. Although, was it yesterday or 2 days ago? He made sure to say, "I'll reenact any war."
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So like,
So-
so I grew up doing French and Indian, Revolutionary War,
Okay.
Civil War. So that really was part of what. And then my dad's a history teacher,
Right.
so he was like our bedtime stories. Like most kids got
Yeah.
like Little Bunny, whatever. Our bedtime stories were like, here's an oral telling of the Battle of Midway. Here's how the War of 1812 began and ended. Like that. Those were the stories I grew up
That's
on.
funny.
So very similar.
Yeah.
Very similar.
I'm a huge wrestling fan, so my daughter gets a similar treatment, but not with war stories, but with wrestling. Here, let me tell you about when Hulk Hogan body slammed Andre the Giant the first time, and how crazy that was. Anyway, but anyway, we don't need to talk about that. But
It was a great moment.
yeah, great moment. But so you were you raised? Was the private school a Catholic private school?
No, and I'm not Catholic myself. No, it was.
But University of Dallas is
a Catholic
okay.
school. Yeah, they're
Okay.
a Catholic, private Catholic school. And part of why I picked them was because of it really had nothing to do other than like, I knew I wanted to do history, but it was the school. It was the school itself. It was sort of the campus
Right.
characteristics. And then they have this Rome program where they have a campus.
You can go away.
About
Yeah.
20 kilometers south of Rome, and
Yeah.
basically you're almost required to go your sophomore year, either in the
Okay.
fall or the spring. And so I spent a semester.
It's like a birthright for that campus kind of thing.
Basically, yeah. Everybody goes. Most people go. I mean, they can't send everybody, but
Right.
most people spend a semester over in Rome, and that was something that really appealed to me.
That's kinda neat.
It was great.
Yeah.
It was a fantastic experience.
Yeah. So what would you say, as far as personally, was the kind of the biggest challenge for you, not having a background in theater, to just diving in head first? What was kind of like, were you made fun of in college theater as like, you don't know what upstage and downstage is? Like, were there those kind of minor challenges, or were there just?
I think it was more of the big challenges. So I had enough, like with the little plays that we would do
Sure.
at school and going to see theater, and like I loved theater. Like
Right.
I loved watching it. I loved the idea of it. And so I think I had picked up. I don't overtly remember too many of those sorts of moments of sort of like
Yeah.
the basic stuff. But then it was when I took my first acting class, was when I was like, wow, there's a
whole
so we
world.
would sit, and I remember we had our acting journal that we kept, and the first like 20 pages is me going like, what are we doing? Like we're pretending to hold an apple. Like, what's the point of this? I want to give me a scene. And
Yeah.
like it was me sort of like railing against this sort of what I felt was this sort of pointless exercises. And then it's interesting to kind of watch as we go and we start to get into Stanislavski and like that, realizing that like, oh, there's a method to like there's an art to this and almost a science to some of this. So for me, it was that hurdle, like stuff that I would have gotten, all that foundational stuff that I would have gotten had I had a theater program in high school. I was sort of playing catch up in college, and I don't know really, like I ended up, and I'm not tooting any horn right now, but like I ended up getting cast in a lot of fairly big roles.
Sure.
Part of it is a very small department, and
Right.
so the pool was pretty small. But I think for whatever reason, I'm just one of those, like I'm not saying I'm naturally talented. I'm not an actor.
but-
I act, but like for that group of people, I
Yeah.
was one of the better ones.
Sure.
And so I played Richard III.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because like coming from no formal training
Right.
at that point, it was just something that felt natural. Like it just felt right a lot of the time. It was just, there was that getting used to
Yeah.
the sort of the minutia that now makes sense. Now it's second nature. through line. And like, I remember sitting in directing class. That was, I think, the biggest shock for me, was when we started talking about the act of directing a show and like the structure of a show. And it's not just a series of interesting or funny moments. It's like, there's a through line. There's the spine. Like, the first time the director said the spine of the play, like, my eyes glazed over. I was like, what?
Do you think that your experience would have been different if you had come from big city to University of Dallas? Or was it kind of, did you already kind of feel comfortable, because that's not a huge school as well, so your community that you grew up in was small, and you kind of already knew this kind of small feeling?
I think that, that's a good point.
So,
like, I think that transition was good. I also hated high school.
Sure.
I was one of those kids that despised high school.
Yeah.
And it was, I loved the schooling aspect of it. I hated my classmates with a passion, because I also, I was in a class, it was a class of 18 people.
They're all big fans of this podcast, so just
great.
be careful.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I'm going to say everything. I'm calling y'all out. I'm going to start at the top of the alphabet.
They're only 15, right?
15, yeah. I just despised all of them. And it was because I'd spent the last 12 years of my life with the same. Sure. It fluctuated. People would come and go, but the same core of 12 people, and we were just all sick of it. I mean, it was family at that point. We'd been around. Oh yeah. We'd literally taken every single class together every day for 12 years. Yeah. And so we were all just done with, and I was done with them. I was done with the high school pettiness. I was so ready for, because in my mind, college was these erudite people sitting around and discussing philosophy. And,
that's exactly what it is.
It's 100%. There's no writing of any sort. And so I was so ready to get to college. And that's part of why I sort of did my sort of dropout, sort of gap year, senior year thing. Which ultimately I'm really glad I did, because I think that helped with the transition too, because I wasn't doing a hard transition from high school to college. I sort of got this slide, as I put it, as I tell my students, I oozed into college.
That's gross, but but there are lots of jokes there that I'm just not going to explore.
There was a lot of
so okay, moving on. So I went to a performing arts high school. So my experience with high school, small class, not that small, but 3 hours a day with the same 20 to 25 people, every day. We didn't have homecoming. Our only sport that we had that our school competed with was swimming and diving. So we didn't have any of those things. I'm assuming you didn't have a lot of that either. You didn't have you didn't field a football team, right?
I played soccer for 6 years.
Right, you can do that kind of stuff. It's a little cheaper.
I played baseball. We had baseball and we had a basketball team.
Okay. But did you have homecoming? Did you have that kind of stuff? Did you have the traditional things?
We'd have a dance.
Okay.
But it was because the schools, it was like everybody. It was just a school-wide dance.
So when you come to a school like Richardson, is that kind of stuff a shock to you a little bit?
Well, I mean, I was aware of it because I had all my friends. Because
we're in Texas.
Because I hated all the people. Because I hated all the people that I was in school with. My friends were all friends that basically I had one friend that had gone to the school, had left in the 5th grade, but we had stayed friends, and then he had gone off to Midlothian High School, and I had sort of
and that's a large
followed him, and then as a result, that became my friend group. Him, he was the entry point, and Midlothian, all the Midlothian people, and so I spent all my time hanging out with these, what most people would consider, rednecks, and so our weekends were spent driving 4-wheelers off of cliffs and cow tipping and stuff like that. And so that was sort of like my outlet. That was my outlet. And so as a result, I was aware. I sort of was clued into
the real the real high school world. Right.
So I sort of got it by proxy. Even who was it? But coming here to the big high school. I mean, there was definitely just the sheer. I think I wasn't prepared for the sheer number of things that the kids have available to them. It's and especially us being a magnet school. We have 12 different magnets within here, everything from automotive to culinary to health science. We have just the range of stuff that's available to kids in a mid to large size high school these days is impressive. It's really impressive.
Your time in high school, as far as not having that theater background, do you teach Theater 1 kids?
No.
Have you ever?
No, I do not.
Is Tech 1 a freshman course?
Yes.
So
I teach Tech 1. So
I got to get to my point, man.
Okay, sorry, yes.
But I mean, like, does you not having a background give you more patience with? So at my school, Theater 1 is a prereq. You can't be in Tech 1 until you take Theater 1. That's just how I've set it up.
Gotcha.
I think there are 2 other schools in my district that do the same. It's not a district thing. It's just personal preference. So I try to have patience with my Theater 1 kids, but again, I went to a performing arts high school where day number 2, you were reading Shirtlift's book. It's like, so it's very hard for me to have patience with Theater 1 kids, which is why I've dwindled down the number of Theater 1 classes I have. But do you find yourself having more patience with those beginners because you didn't have that background?
One, specifically in tech, because, and I noticed this, like interacting with some of the other technical directors in the district who went through programs in their high schools where they had tech, and so they learned a lot of the foundational stuff early. I remember, like I can vividly remember, like the first time I actually used a table saw was in college. Like I had never come close to one, and the technical director asked me to go cut a piece of wood, and I didn't want to look dumb, and I watched other people do it. And so I proceeded to attempt to freehand. I think I actually like completely removed the fence from the saw and attempted to freehand a piece of 3/4 inch plywood, and the saw made terrible noises, and he came running in and disconnected it, and I picked up a lot of the...
Oh, it's a motion sense.
Yeah, motion sense.
I was like, man, it's just like my school. The power just goes out.
And I have to credit him. His name's Tristan Decker. He teaches now over at TWU. He's the technical director there. But I think I got a lot of my sort of formative how I interact with the students from him. He's always very calm. He never got angry. He never got. He always failure was an expectation, but in a sense of like, okay, so that went wrong. How do we fix it? I'm not, I don't care why it happened. I don't care who did it. What I care is that we move forward and we fix it. And so having that really, to me, it's still very recent. Like there's some stuff where I don't remember learning it.
Right.
Like learning how to use a tape measure was something that for me now is something that has sort of, where now when a kid doesn't understand how to do it, I do have that kind of that initial moment of like, how do you not, or like fractions, like just doing fractions in your head. I don't remember learning that anymore. So now it's like I have this like, oh, well, everybody must know how to do it. And I have to catch myself and go, okay, let's wind this back all the way, like rip it down to the core foundational stuff. Because, and kind of, put myself back in their place, but it's easier with, especially with like some of the tools and stuff of like, because I remember it's still not a recent memory, but a distinct memory where I can distinctly remember the first time I used an impact driver.
Sure.
Like the mistakes I made, how I made those mistakes, how I corrected those mistakes, and then it helps me sort of go, okay, I see what you're doing wrong. Right. I can hear, and I think most tech directors can talk to you can hear someone doing something wrong from the other side of the shop, and you know exactly what they're doing wrong. And you can usually just shout one instruction to them: push harder, turn it to the left, angle, back off, angle it. Because we've done it so much, and it's become ingrained.
I do think, though, and I tell my students this all the time, I do think God put me on this earth to be able to unscrew the hardest screw. Like, I don't think I have a purpose beyond that, because I will, I fashion myself a pretty decent carpenter, but when I have a student, when we're striking a set, and I'm not a nail guy, we only use screws, and we don't have pneumatics in my school or anything, so we can't, we don't really even have that, unless we're sitting there like Jesus with a hammer and a nail, we don't really have the pneumatic option. So we wood screws, deck screws, all that stuff. But I'll have a kid just completely strip the heck out of something, and I'll go over and just quick, real fast, and they are
like
just
magic. Like they think you're a magician.
Oh, it's amazing.
Because like 4 of them will have sat there for half an hour, and then you just come over and you're like, whoop.
Yeah.
And there's always the one kid who's like, how does he do it? And the other one's like, he's been doing it forever.
Well, it's funny. You tell them. And we're going off on like personal tangents here, but just between you and I. But I will tell a kid, like, you got to put some power. Like, you can't just hold the drill
Right.
all sloppy.
You gotta lean into it,
You have to, like, and then you have kids that are like, I am leaning. No, you're not doing anything. Like, your elbow's not locked. There's nothing, Anyway,
Yeah.
little soapbox moment there.
Yeah. I wish there was. I wonder, like, if we could get. You know what we need? What the tech world needs? It needs a pressure plate.
Do I need to trademark this?
Yeah,
right
this moment right now. This is going to come out of this podcast. So we need a pressure plate.
Yeah.
Like
I see what you're
in
saying.
Rocky
Yeah.
4
Yeah.
or whatever, where Drago they punch.
Yeah, punching it.
So we
Yeah.
need a pressure plate that they can practice pushing a drill against, and it'll turn green when you're using the.
Or it's just the
correct amount of force.
idea of a strong man at a carnival. Just that idea. Just how much force are you giving
Yeah,
it?
exactly. Yeah, because I think it's and again, this
I'm
is
gonna have
that-
to cut that out of the
Sure,
podcast.
so that we can patent that for later. But
That is a good
again, that
idea.
gets back to that, like, you and I don't remember I don't distinctly remember the first time I actually felt what that was like, because there is a feeling
Yeah.
to pushing hard enough on a drill that it's actually locked
In
in
the right
and
angle,
that first
and,
time
yeah.
the first time that screw just sinks in the whole
Yeah.
way, it doesn't skip,
Yeah.
there's not the loud noises. So for you and I, that's second nature.
Right.
Like, that's just, our bodies do it naturally. These kids are literally doing it for the first
Yeah,
time,
sure.
and they don't, like, just the word push harder doesn't mean anything
Right.
to them. And so I try to, like, really my philosophy is to try and guide, like, it.
Well, there's a coaching element. I mean, and as male
yeah.
teachers, I'm sure you have students that call you
Oh,
coach.
yeah.
And there is I'm not a coach, but there's an element of coaching.
Absolutely.
You gotta fix your angle, fix your grip, fix all that kind of stuff, just for a drill.
Well, and what we do is so practical.
Yeah.
It's so utterly practical. And I've noticed in the last few years I've been kind of steadily moving away from theory, at least with the Tech 1 classes.
Sure.
Because it tends to make kids shut down when I go deep into, like, hey, we're going to talk about,
Right.
like, we'll do color theory and stuff like
Yeah.
that when it's practical, and I can do practical, like we do the M&M thing, when
Yeah.
we do lighting, and
Yeah. That's fun though. I mean,
Yeah.
they get a kick out of that.
but like
yeah.
doing like the theater history and stuff, now it's become just sort of a quick overview here and there that's sort of sprinkled throughout.
Yes.
Whereas I used to do, like, hey, we're going to spend the first 3 weeks
Lecture
doing,
time,
Yeah,
yeah.
here's lecture
Yeah.
time, and it just, I was getting bored. Like,
Yeah.
I was, and last year it was, I was kind of at the beginning of the year, in like middle of the first week, I was like, man, I'm tired of listening to myself
Yeah.
talk.
Yeah. Do it.
And so I've moved away from the theory, at least the way that the theory is. Like I said, I kind of sprinkle it in for more of the practical. And I'm actually trying to, next year, get one of my Tech 1 classes converted over to to just a shop class.
Yeah.
Because there's a bunch of kids who, they light up, they come alive when you put a tool in their hands, or let them cut a piece of wood.
Sure.
Like, that's the most and that's probably the most invested they're going to be all day long
Right.
at school. And then as soon as it's, okay, here's a handout about, costume
Right.
history, they're done. You might
So
as well.
would you make that class kind of they would do the scenery and the props and stuff like that, but
No.
So-
it would be a pure, like, we may incidentally work on some of that
Sure.
stuff, but it would be a pure, okay, day one, we're learning all the shop safety.
sure.
Week 2, we're going to start in on measuring and marking.
Okay.
And then we're going to learn every tool, and then basically it would be a carpentry class. The way I've been talking with the counselors and some of the people, we might do it as a Kate class.
Yeah.
They actually have a cabinetry.
Do you guys already have a shop class here?
No.
Oh, okay. Well,
No.
that helps.
Like, not a
explain it.
carpentry, no woodworking.
Yeah,
we
yeah,
have
yeah.
a shop. We do have metalworking.
Yeah.
And it's under the robotics
Right.
magnet that we have here. They have a really nice shop, and that's also sort of my ulterior motive is, like, if we can get that Kate class, it would open up a lot of funding for us to be able to upgrade
Sure.
our existing space and equipment, because we could show a need.
Yeah,
for it.
there becomes a tangible reason to do it.
Um,
What are they working on now?
So we're working on the set for our fall show. We're doing an Enemy of the People.
Okay.
Arthur Miller. Well, it's the Arthur Miller adaptation
Yeah.
of the Ibsen play. I'm directing that one.
Okay.
Which I'm kind of regretting because it's
That's the windows that I saw.
windows in the floor. Yeah, we're doing our fall show is always black box.
Okay.
Black box, small space, and then our spring musical will be.
Okay. What
on
are you guys
stage.
doing?
You're in town.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Our district is very, very permissive. Like they trust us really well.
You guys have Pierce's in this district,
yes,
right?
and so they did the Heathers premiere. They did.
That's the same. The year after is when we were trying to do it.
Yeah. But like we've done Bat Boy.
Okay.
We did Legally Blonde last year, which is and so it's kind of one of those things where it's just you never know. I mean, last year so we do a children's, so we have fall show, musical, UIL. We do a children's show. All 4 of the schools in the district do a children's show every year where they bus in all the elementary kids from that feeder pattern.
Okay.
And like last year we did Space Pandas, the Mammoth kids show.
I'm not familiar with that, but
it's
yeah.
great.
Okay.
Oh, it's great.
Okay.
Yeah, David Mamet wrote a kids show
Okay.
about these space pandas that steal this kid.
Do you think he wrote it with curse words and then they just went in and struck him out?
I don't know.
Anyway.
They have some creative, sort of like edits, things that I feel very Mamet. But we had like a parent get mad because their kid came home and told them that one character was mean to another character, and they wrote a letter, and so the mother wrote a letter to
how dare you?
the fine arts. Or like there was the set had the word like idiot on it with an arrow pointing to a character that was and like a parent took pictures of it and posted it on a Facebook group. And there was a minor,
you're a horrible
minor,
person.
Yeah, exactly. There was a minor, and so now we have to get our kids' shows approved.
Sure. Okay.
Which it's like, okay, all right. But I mean, that's kind of just where that's where we're at right now, especially here in Texas. That's just kind of what.
Well, and did you see all this this stuff about don't change the words? What dramatist, the dramatist thing? It's funny, that stuff comes out, and they're just, we in Texas we have the UIL stuff, the one-act play, which we change all kinds of content, and it's based on your community now.
Recut the whole shows.
I mean, like I've even gotten into a conversation. I won't name these names right now, but actually one of them's been on this podcast. But she did a show that went to state versus a school that was right down the street from her, not in the same district but close. That did the same show. Both shows were completely different stories. Full-length shows that they cut down to 40 minutes or whatever, 39, 30. And they were completely different stories. The one director who didn't make it to state was a little upset with how the cut was done that made it to state because they didn't feel it was that story.
Yeah, right.
But who's to say? That's the career we have now is you have to cut and decide.
Well, and UIL, I have so many problems with.
Yeah, because you didn't grow up in the UIL world, so
that was the biggest shock to me. Coming into public school, having never touched UIL once, I had no.
Do you direct your one-act play?
I do not.
Okay.
I have.
Okay.
I should say so there's 4 of us in the
department. You kind
department.
of cycle through.
There's 2 theater teachers and 2 technical theater teachers, and we're technically 2 separate magnets. We have a theater magnet and a tech theater magnet.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we cycle. I've directed UIL twice, I think, in the last 5 years. This is my first time directing one of the main stages.
Okay.
Which is great because it's not all the stupid restrictions
right.
of UIL.
Yeah.
And I feel like UIL has drifted into a place where it's gotten so muddy.
Right.
I feel like the purpose has gotten so muddied by the restrictions, and the restrictions all make sense. Like philosophically, they make sense. Like, yes, we want to level the playing field because it's not about the set and the lights and the props and the costumes. This is about students telling a story in the best way possible. And I feel like the changes, like when I came in, it was right before there was a raft of changes. Like I came in like the year before, there was a whole raft of changes that sort of loosened restrictions on some things, and then they've loosened more and more. and I like some of them, but it's just gotten so legalistic.
Right.
And the other thing with UIL is I don't know, it's kind of that catch-22 of trying to judge art. Like, can you really objectively judge art?
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're not judging art. That's not the point of UIL. At least the mission statement claims that it's not about judging art. It's about giving students an opportunity to learn from professional feedback in a setting where they get to, with a level playing field, present a piece of theater against other people who are also presenting pieces of theater that they've worked on. And they're supposed to get meaningful feedback.
Right.
And so when you have feedback which I know every single director has their stories, and so everybody knows what I'm talking about, but like when you have a feedback form that comes back with, well, when I directed this show, we did this and this, and you didn't do that, and therefore I'm giving you an 8. You get 8th place. It's just, or like they're dinging shows for design choices that none of the students had anything to do with, or directing choices even. Like, in my mind, you should only be putting like either professional directors or professional actors into those judge roles if you're actually going to fulfill the mission.
Right.
Because they need to you need people in there who can look past the design choices, who can look past the directing choices in some cases and watch the students. Because it's not about the teachers.
And the assumption,
it's not about us.
The assumption is that you are cultivating and grooming kids to move on into professional theater, even though we know realistically they're not, like the majority of them are not going to. The idea is to have that professional that says, well, in this world, where I come from as a professional actor, director, technician, whatever, designer, this is how it's done. I see that. There's an argument to be made, and I've talked with lots and lots of people about this, that one-act plays should just become staged readings and let the actors stand there with a script and perform and have no direction, no scenery, and that'll never happen, But if they want the idea of let's remove all of the fluff, because there is a lot of, and man, as a lighting designer, because that's my background, I get lots of directors that say, hey, can you light this a little darker than usual? Because I just didn't put as much work into this dance or something like that, which really isn't that feasible. You're still going to see it. But there is so much fluff that sometimes they put it on top of a show that is not that good, but the show looks great and maybe sounds great, but it's not done really well from top to bottom. You don't have great actors. You don't have a great direction. You might have even chosen the wrong script. I had a conversation with the other director at my school. We have 2. It's me and her. But talking about the show I want to do for one-act play, and she said, we can't do this show. And I'm really gung-ho about it. I really want to do it. Excuse me. But she finally said it doesn't showcase our kids. Right. It doesn't highlight our kids, the kids that we have this year. In 3 years maybe. And she's right. She's 100% right. So we're back to the drawing board. But that's also, I don't have a directing background, so I don't look at the world in that regard with those kind of lenses. Nor have I ever really wanted to be a director. Every once in a while when I find a show I like, I want to direct it because I just want it to be my baby. But yeah, that's it's interesting. So do you find though, like, did you do anything and I want you to make sure you eat. Did you do anything in your time in high school or even before that lent itself at all to one-act play or to competitive theater at all?
So we did. My friends and I would. We did. I went through a period where I really wanted to go to film school.
Okay.
And so my friends and I would compete in the 24-hour video race here in Dallas. We did that a couple of summers in a row. We actually won. I think the 3rd year we did it, we won for our category and got our little short film on PBS like at 11:15.
Little cable access.
Well, that's PBS, it's the local.
Well, I know, but yeah, it's local
played,
kind of thing.
Played once on
Yeah.
television. We got to go see it they had the screening at the Angelica.
Oh,
Like for all the,
okay.
so we got to go, like they showed all the, we got our little 5-minute film on there. So that, like having that background and being, like doing that sort of structured
Sure.
competition helps. I grew up playing a lot of board games, and so like tabletop games,
Sure.
miniature games, and so like rule books and having to like not having a computer handle it for like you're handling
Yeah.
the rules, like that was very much in my wheelhouse.
Right.
Like, so that part of it, I was like, oh, so we're going to treat this like a game, and basically we're going to try and figure out how to break the rules, which everybody basically does. Is like,
Yeah.
how do I creatively bend the rules in the most elaborate way, which theater really does lend itself to that, because
Sure.
that's basically what your script is. If you think about it, I mean, a script
Yeah.
is a rule book. It's like, you have to do these things.
Right.
Everything else
Yep.
needs to be in service of that, but it's kind of up to you.
Yeah.
Like the actual block, like sure they may have written in blocking, but you don't have to do it. Like
Yeah.
they may have written in a set description, you don't have to do it, as long as it's in service of the show. And that's where I think that's something I try to push back against really hard, especially this early on, because that was one of the hard lessons I learned in college. Was I remember working, it was my senior show, my senior thesis show, because I had discovered Ionesco and absurdism, which is I love the absurdists, all of them. Like that's oh God, I love it so much.
Explains a little bit with your, and not that your set is absurdist, but
That
it explains a little
deconstructed.
bit of that. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's always been, I call it like minimalist realism, or like deconstructed realism.
Sure.
Where it's like, I'm not going to build the whole room, but the pieces I do have,
You can tell what it
gonna
is.
be,
Yeah.
like ultra detailed.
Right.
So like we're hand laying a wood floor in there.
Right.
And that we're going to stain and seal.
Right.
And like, to me, that's I love black box spaces. The theater that in college, our theater was a little like 85 seat, three-quarter thrust,
Okay.
Sort of pseudo replica of the Guthrie stage.
Okay.
That sort of that hexagonal
Yeah.
thrust stage, and like the whole room was 25 feet,
Right.
30 feet from side to side. Like our stage was like 10 by 10, and we did Shakespeare. We did
Right.
like all this amazing, and the energy in when you're in a tight space.
Yeah,
like
the
that,
intimacy
energy
of
is
it,
just
yeah.
fantastic.
Sure.
And so that's why I personally hate I hate doing the big, like I'll do them. It allows you to do a lot of cool stuff, but doing the big proscenium shows.
Yeah.
We have a 60-foot proscenium. It's ridiculous.
Right.
And the closest audience member is like 25 feet away.
Yeah.
You don't even get a 10-foot rule. You get a 25-foot rule.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we could print stuff off on a printer and just slap it up, and people would be like, "Wow, that's
Yeah.
it's brick wall," because they're so freaking far away from the stage, and I get very little joy from that.
Right.
I'll do it. It lets us do some really massive, cool stuff. Flying in the whole house for Legally Blonde.
Sure.
Like, that was cool. It's a cool moment. I get no joy from it.
Right.
And so if I'm gonna condo my life, I'm gonna take that proscenium
Yeah.
and throw it away and go. I'd just live in the black box, because
Yeah.
I love that kind of space so much more. I think it also forces, for like students working in there, it forces you have to have an attention to detail
Right.
in order to be successful in a space like that, because the audience is right there, and we don't want to take them out. Like
Yeah.
you can, in a proscenium, you can sort of get, because like a proscenium, if someone turns their head even slightly, they're in an auditorium.
Right.
But in a black box, you're in the space,
Yep.
and it should feel like you're in the space.
Yeah.
We did, I think my favorite set we've done in there was, we did By the Bog of Cats, and we like laid like a bog floor. We laid grass pretty much in the whole space, and we had creeping fog. Like we had
Wow.
trailers under the seating, and so it was misty and foggy the whole time, and we had the trailer in the corner of
Yeah.
the house, and
That's
and
a
it
lot
was
more
just like,
fun.
from the
Yeah.
time you entered the space you were in.
Yeah.
We actually, my fellow tech director at the time found an additive that was like bog
For the smell.
scent.
Yeah.
For the fog, and so it had that peat,
Yeah.
sort of peaty
done that before with blood for a
Okay.
haunted house that I did years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah,
We did a blood smell. It was
Nice.
disgusting. But want to ask you a couple more things. First of all, the one, because I agree, the black boxes are, in my opinion, the best type of space. The one negative that I've found with students, and you can give me an amen or you could disagree, I don't know, but is vocal work. So when they transfer over to, because we do all of our same thing, we do all of our fall shows in the black box, we do all of our spring shows practically in the, we do some student produced stuff back in the black box, but the musical, of course, and one act play are both in proscenium spaces, and we end up having vocal issues because they've just spent the last 4 or 5 months in this intimate space where they can talk like you and I are talking right now, and then when they get into this 1,100 seat space, they can't get to that last row.
Right.
That's maybe the one negative, but I get the lack of sort of, I guess, gratitude or gratification behind
See,
doing a space like that.
I kind of come down on the, I guess, kind of the opposite side of that, in that I think, personally, I don't think we should be putting high school students on stage on big prosceniums, period.
Okay.
Because where they're at developmentally, you have kids who literally can't project that. I
Right.
mean, their voices are literally still developing
Yeah.
and settling. 99% of them have no actual vocal training.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's why in high school, especially, that's why I love, not the only reason, but huge part of why I love the black box
Right.
space so much is because a kid, that they don't have to focus on
It's
that.
a step to their development.
Yeah,
Sure.
they can
Okay.
focus on being intimate, being focused on the emotion and the
Right.
rawness without having to also project. And that's why when I do black box, I'm always going to do a thrust stage, because they also don't need to be trying to turn out,
Right.
and constant. Like, I want to take away, because of where they're at developmentally, learning this craft, I want to take away as many of the impediments as possible, so
Right.
that they can just focus on the core stuff. And then, so now you've done it's your junior, senior year, maybe you've actually, like, been in choir now, and
Yeah.
and yeah, we're always going to have those choir kids who can actually belt because they've had that training. They've been doing choir since middle school.
Sure.
They've been in a class every single day where they've been learning how to support their voice, and that's something that I don't know. I know there are teachers out there who are great at that, who
Yeah.
actually have a background in, like, teaching voice properly, and they spend the time with their students doing it in theater classes. And then, yeah, if you've got that background in the foundation,
Yeah.
and they've done that, throw them on the stage, make them project. But that's one of my big problems with UIL is they try to level the playing field in what you can put on stage, but they don't do anything to level the stage itself.
Right.
And, like, sort of, and so, I mean, yeah, you put the judges 6 rows back, and then it's kind of, but, like, every space is
Yeah.
different. 6 rows is not the same in every space. 6 rows
No.
in our space, they're 30 feet, 40
Yeah.
feet from the stage, whereas 6 rows from the Patty Granville Center in Garland,
Yeah.
where we actually do UIL, 6 rows back is only 15 feet
Right.
from the stage. And so when you have kids who maybe all they've got is a cafetorium, they don't know what their voices sound like when they actually hit these other levels. And so it's like, I think UIL should be a black box thing, and it should be more of a festival.
Yeah.
And it should be like band UIL, where you get ranked, but it's not a first, second, third.
yeah.
It's like, okay, everybody who got ones gets to advance.
Right.
Which, I mean, yes, great. There's all the logistical issues with that.
Minor wisdom.